too.
And we're recording. This meeting is held remotely pursuant to the provisions of an act signed by Governor Baker on July 16th, 2022, an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, which among other things extends the expiration of the provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31st, 2023. Specifically, this extension allows public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely without a quorum of the public body physically present at the meeting location and to provide adequate alternative access to remote meetings. The act does not make any new changes to the open meeting law other than extending the expiration date of the temporary provisions regarding remote meeting from July 16, 2022. We're recording. We're using the Zoom platform. And we'll call the roll to determine we have a quorum, and then we'll open the meeting. So Carolyn?
Here.
And Wayne?
Here.
And MJ?
Here.
And Eloise?
Here.
And Julie?
Somewhere.
Oh, Eloise is here. And Eleanor?
I am here.
Thank you. All right, so having a quorum, we'll call the meeting to order at 7:33. Perfect. Minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes of 12:06?
Mm-hmm.
We have a
Yes.
motion.
Make a motion. I'll second.
Second. All right. Any additions or corrections?
Aye.
Everybody's Eloise. Eloise said aye. Julie?
Aye.
MJ?
Aye.
Wayne?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Eleanor?
Attend the last meeting, so I don't know that I should be approving anything.
You can approve minutes without having attending. You don't
Can I
have to.
approve?
Yep, it's legal. Is that everybody? Aye for me. Okay, we've passed it. And Ellie has been appointed the rep from the Historical Commission, which makes us a full house. So Maureen suggested we acknowledge that through a vote. So if someone wants to make a motion that we acknowledge the appointment of Ellie from Historical Commission, that would be great.
So move.
Second.
Second.
And then we'll do a roll call. Eloise?
Aye.
MJ?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Wayne?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Kim is aye. Ellie, do you want to vote to approve yourself? All right. And welcome. This is great. It's nice to have a full house.
I thought we were the Brady Bunch. What sitcom are we?
Maureen, I got to thinking about the fact that we didn't break into the planning board box. And I suspect that there's we ran that hearing notice twice. And
I got the invoice for that.
for the second one,
Yep.
so did we vote on that already?
No, you voted on the first one.
So we got to vote on this one.
Yeah,
It's
If-
still 103.20.
correct.
All right, so we ran an ad for the public hearing we did for the review of the plan. And if someone wants to make a motion to pay Local IQ New England $103.20, that would be great.
So move.
Move.
In a second.
Second.
All right,
Second.
and we'll do a roll call on that. Carolyn,
Aye.
MJ,
Aye.
Wayne,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Ellie,
Aye.
I know it. We have two Ellies tonight.
Eloise,
Aye.
and Tim, aye. So that's done. Perfect. Perfect. Now, Account balances. As you know, we've pulled in $305,849 from the surcharge in fiscal 23. Fiscal.
Yes.
Yeah, this
23.
past November, right?
And then we got from the state 303,629. But we don't have up-to-date figures from June, which makes it a little complex. We're going to try to tighten things up so when we meet again and finally vote on the proposals that we're going to be reviewing tonight, we'll have a clear sense as to how much money we've actually got in the different accounts. We don't have receipt of the state match, the state grant, actually, it's not a match, the state grant for the acquisition of the Horseshoe Pond piece.
Correct. I can update you on that if you'd like.
That would be great.
So Maddie submitted it for the bulk of, because it's, so the way it works is there's all the line items of all of the expenditures, and then we can submit it as we spend money. So I asked her to submit it about a month ago, and she did. And the woman at the state, her name is Hillary something, kind of sent it back and said, you know what, I think if we work on this and move this and do that, we can cover the interest that you paid as well. So I believe she's just waiting for receipts from Sudbury Valley trustees for the kiosk that was put up. If anybody has seen it, it's quite lovely. And then she's going to resubmit it, but I keep kind of emphasizing the urgency of it.
Okay, so if that money were to return, we've had conversations with June about when that money is available. And our argument would be that it's available for next year's warrant articles, the ones we put on for May, that would be expended not before July 1st, 23. I don't think we're in complete agreement about that yet, but that's going to make a big difference in terms of what we've got available. Because with that returned, we're in real strong shape.
Yes.
Especially given the dollar numbers we're looking at for this year. So
can you just explain that? So if the money comes back in the current fiscal year, I mean, we can't expend it on something else, obviously, until it's voted, but that doesn't mean we can't count it in the coffers to be allotted. Is that what you're talking about? She's saying it can't be considered in the coffers to be allotted until after the next fiscal year?
It's all this question about what's certified and what's not and all that sort of thing. And when I talked to Stuart a while ago, probably over a year ago, from the consortium, and we started talking about availability of funds, he said that he'd had a similar conversation with someone that was familiar with Massachusetts finance, and said, the gentleman said to Stuart, only in Massachusetts can you spend money that you haven't yet collected, but can't spend money you already have. Yeah, so we're in it's always this peculiar issue of when is it expendable, and that's what's, I think at this point, frustrating for June to try to figure out and get a handle on how to use CPA money as to when it's available. The committee has said that we didn't want to spend money that we had anticipated or estimated, that we only wanted to spend money that we had in hand. So we do indeed have the 303 from the state that they paid us in November. And in the coffers of the community housing fund, there's a significant amount of money because we haven't spent any of that. But we've expended on a pretty regular basis all the money that was in open space and rec and historic, because those were the 10% amounts that were allocated on an annual basis for the first couple of years. And we've depleted that, but theoretically more money goes into that fund starting in fiscal 24, right? After the town meeting.
Yep.
So 10% should be dumped into each one of those again that ought to be available for the town meeting that we're going to have in May. Plus, there's money in that would go into the balance reserve, and we voted last year, and we spent some of that we spent 23,000 or so last year at the town meeting from 23's fiscal year, but there should be still quite a chunk of that balance reserve. So that's what we'll try to square away with June before we meet the next time.
Okay, thank
That
you.
Tim, can I
confusing
ask
enough?
a question?
Yeah.
Is there any other community we can lean on that has done this before, this process like this with this money coming back, and what they recommend and how their accounting does it so it can get to us as a board?
So what we did is we chatted with Stuart, and he said the best thing for you to do is to talk to your DOR agent, your rep for your town, because they're the ones who are going to give you the definitive answer. And so June has had some conversation with her rep, but she's wound up with a number of other projects right now too. So, but anyway, we'll get some good figures one way or the other. That's Maureen and I have that task at hand for the next 2 weeks. So that's it for balances. Annual town report draft. Everybody got a copy of that?
Yes.
And does anybody have anything they want to change or modify? I think the figure that we used for the grant from the state was not accurate.
We left it blank, actually. We did X.
Right out.
Yeah.
It's 8.
It's like 874 and change. I actually meant to do that.
Anything else?
All needs to be updated that we now have one more member.
It's for 2022, MJ.
Right.
Yeah, it's the 2022 report. Other questions or comments or additions? All right, so does someone want to make a motion that we submit the Community Preservation Act annual report to the Town Report Committee?
So move.
And a
Second.
second?
Second,
And we'll do a roll call on that. Julie,
Sorry, aye.
Eloise,
Aye.
Ellie,
Aye.
MJ,
Aye.
Wayne,
Aye.
Carolyn,
Aye.
Tim, aye. Good, thank you. We're on a roll. Let's come back to community member updates. Administrative matters, updates, discussion of terms. So this year, Eloise and Julie are the two members that are up for renewal, and both have indicated a willingness to be reappointed by their appropriate committees. That's still the case? No one's got cold feet since I chatted with you?
I'm waiting for the throng to start banging down the door.
Yeah, aren't we all? But
Yeah.
okay, so thank you both, because that's great. And Julie pointed out that having continuity on this committee in its infancy, and we're still in our infancy, is a benefit. So as we go through our growing pains and we continue to refine our procedures and all, it's great to have people stick around. And actually, it is kind of fun to be able to work on these projects with these committees, because
So I just found the exact dollar amount of the grant.
perfect.
$874,268.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I meant to do that, when I read the report.
So that takes care of the new appointments.
And that is how much money we're eligible for reimbursement?
Correct.
A full amount?
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I know.
Yeah, because we put in 490 and 350. So actually, are we entitled to the full amount? Because we put in 840, right?
Right.
So
I've not been able to truly get an actual answer about that. I know that we get at least back what was put in from CPA.
right. So should the town, we didn't take any money from the town other than the money from conservation?
Correct. Well, we did borrow $50,000 from free cash.
But did we expend it?
I believe so.
Okay, so should that go back to free cash then?
I
have
don't
to
know
find
if
that
it can. So what I haven't been able to get a clear understanding about is if CPA money is used, reimbursement money has to go back to CPA. And I don't know if that's just what CPA put out or if that's all of it.
Okay, so Maureen and I will figure that out with June and Stuart.
That would be great.
And the other thing is that dollar amount is likely to change and go upward.
It could very well. Or they're like moving some money around. It may not end up being the $268, but it's, 874,000, give or take.
Okay, good.
Yep. And I would just like to thank everybody once again for their support. I know I hogged all the money early, but
now everybody got the memos from Kristen that we sent around.
about
Maureen, do you want to bring people up to speed on what those entailed?
Yeah, so there was an email that went out. I think it went out probably the second email that went out. One was it went to all the boards and commissions, and it was about oath of office, ethic training. It's dated December 20th. I think town administrator's office initially just sent it to chairs. So if you're chair of your other board or commission, you probably got it. But I just sent that as an attachment for everybody for what was going on there.
So it's good for everybody to review it. It talks about some procedural issues and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do some cleanup in the, and Eloise can probably speak to this too, in regard to making sure all the committees have the correct people, expiration dates, done their ethics training, which I understand that actually expires every 2 years or needs to be redone every 2 years. You know,
could I interrupt right there? Right now, once you do it, it will stay on the state computer, so I won't have to track it. And for that, I'm grateful.
Oh, that is great.
So everybody should log in and see whether it's expired or not.
Well, right now, James and I, we've just dealt the census. I just did this cost certification for the September and the November elections. So one of our next big projects is getting an updated list that we can send out to the different departments, because
Perfect.
people complain that it's very burdensome. So, you know, but as they do it, we'll keep track of it.
Okay.
Awesome. I
Great.
don't know that I can speak as conservation chair. I don't know that I was aware that it expired. So I certainly wasn't keeping track. So once
Sometimes we don't know when people come into the town on a board or a committee, or when they leave. I mean, I can see you around town, but it doesn't tell me, oh, so-and-so moved out of town. You know, so-and-so is now on this committee. Sometimes I find it by accident. But it's a work in progress, and we'll get there in the end.
Excellent.
So if you get a chance to read that attachment that Maureen sent around, that would be good, because it just brings us up to date on how we have to comply with certain regs.
Well, with that, can I ask the question about the reorganization paragraph that says at the first meeting of the year?
Right.
Is that this meeting then?
No, it'd
Or
be
is
the
it-
first meeting, like after an election or after appointment.
okay.
I mean, you could, because we now have Ellie. If maybe Ellie wants to be chairman, I don't.
Thank you.
Well, it's
But
just that
she
it
might
said
also
first meeting
resign
of-
if I push the issue.
it just says the first meeting of the year, so I just when it
Yeah,
says
you
that-
took it literally, and
Yeah.
rightfully
And is-
so.
So we've reviewed that and agree with Eloise. So on July 1st, that'll be the first meeting of the,
fiscal year.
whatever meeting we have after July 1st will be the new fiscal year, and we'll
Got it.
have a chance to discuss reorganization at that point. But think
Thanks.
about roles, and if you have interest in serving in different capacities than you do now, be prepared.
You're not getting out of it that easy, Mr. Wheeler.
And speaking of roles, we need to present the community preservation plan, or unwrap it, I guess. And Maureen and I have been talking about the notion that probably a presentation to the select board, where we send it ahead of time, get on their agenda, and then just go in and chat about the fact that we've updated the plan, which is a requirement that we have, so they're fully aware. So I'm interested if anybody is interested in working in that capacity as a liaison with the select board. I wondered if, Wayne, you might be interested. You've had experience with the select board in the past, and whether whether you'd be willing to,
Feeling faint.
once we set up a meeting, whether you'd be willing to go and share the report with them and field any questions.
To the best of my ability, I'm a newbie still, but sure.
Oh yeah,
Thanks, Wayne.
that'd be great. Well, you know how
I don't really think they're meeting in person that much these days.
No, it's
either,
just Zoom.
so.
Yeah, so you can still sit at home and.
Oh, I don't care. I mean, it's like whatever. I just hope I know what I'm doing. So I'll have to confer just to be sure I know what I'm.
Well, would you like to take MJ along with you, and the two of you?
Oh, so like I'm supposed to know what I'm doing too now?
No, I'm fine. I mean, I went over the plan. I mean, I can talk about why we developed the plan, the way we developed it.
I mean, we have confidence in you.
Yeah.
You've demonstrated your capacity to
ask questions,
deal with the unknown sometimes too. So that would be
really
good.
an unknown, actually, though. So.
I'm going to meet with Kristen tomorrow about some other stuff, but I wanted to bring up the notion that we wanted to present the plan. So I will ask her when she thinks an appropriate time would be, and then I'll get back to you and see if we can coordinate.
Sure.
Perfect. I talked to Anna Crane the other day, who's chair of the Capital Planning Committee. And I think what she is hoping is that the proponents of the different projects that we might approve when we meet again would then go and speak to capital planning. And we talked about the notion that capital planning frequently is looking for notice from different boards and committees that they want to spend money by November 1st. And I said, well, we're going to be in a position where we're probably receiving the majority of our applications by November 1st. If people know what they're applying for, if stuff comes up in the interim, I told her it's not going to be easy for us to give you stuff by November 1st. But I said, probably early in November, we could give you an inkling of any proposals that had come to us. And they're interested in knowing what proposals are being put forward because they don't want confusion about where money's coming from. And sometimes it may be a hybrid project where some of it's CPA and some of it's town or some of it's conservation. And so we're just going to try to coordinate a little more closely with them. And the fine, yes? Did someone say something?
Yes, I was going to say at our last meeting, they also said when people do present projects, they'd like to, they often forget what happens once you install something. You have
the maintenance costs.
Yeah, or sidewalks, know. Once you get them, that's fine, but you've got to shovel them in the winter, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of boards, they come with pretty good ideas, but not on the follow through.
So Anna and I talked about that today too, and yesterday, and so that's one of the reasons I think they would like to meet with the proponents of different projects as they proceed through the process, just so they can have that type of conversation.
Can they just attend our meetings here, like when we're in the process of asking questions and things like that? So that, I mean, it sounds like the timing's off of stuff. So if the point is just to be informed of what's going on, so they can, be thinking about those things, and the proponent, whether it's, a fence at the public garden or, the proposed, shed, pavilion, what's the ongoing upkeep, those kinds of things. I guess that's what you're trying to, I guess that's the point, is that type of, okay.
Yep. All right. Now, in half an hour, we meet with the the proponent for the pavilion. In the interim, we can talk about these two other proposals, which I apologize for the fact that these are coming in late in the game, but this is one of those situations where we didn't know about them.
Mhm.
So the first is the Carter Street opportunity. So 72 Carter is an 8.5 acre parcel that has frontage on Carter Street opposite Wheeler's Garage. And it extends up Powder House Hill toward the top. It doesn't get to the summit. There's another parcel of 7.5 acres that comes across from Carter Street across from the library and goes up and attaches to the Powder House piece and Faith Lindsay's backyard. So this 8.5 acre parcel has come up for sale, and James Holyoke, who was on the committee with us for a while, who was aware of the town's interest in affordable housing and open space, brought it to Carolyn's attention, and Carolyn and I have talked a little bit about it. And we had an opportunity to walk through the house with Kevin Pond, who does house inspections. And James was there for a little bit of that conversation. And the house was in surprisingly good shape. From the outside, sometimes it appeared as though it might be a little under
tear down.
under cared for. But actually, all new windows, new siding, relatively new siding. The roof wasn't in bad shape. There's some ventilation issues that have to be dealt with. The cellar was in sound condition, good foundation, no obvious leakage of water or anything. The second floor, you walk into the cellar if you want, but so you have to walk up steps to get to the main floor. 3 bedrooms, only 1 bath on that floor, and a living room, a kitchen, and a sort of another room similar to the living room. The kitchen would have to be redone. But what we began to wonder was whether there was a possibility of acquiring the entire property using some CPA money, and then putting the town in a position where it could hold at least 4 acres of the open space, particularly that on the higher elevation. Separate the house that's there onto a 2 acre parcel so it conformed with zoning, and make it available to a third party who would then, through and Eloise knows the term, do we call it a local initiative? In that case,
A housing trust can basically hire a contractor through the bid process and get it renovated, not exorbitant, but comparable, so
Right.
that it can be sold.
And I've had a conversation with Lauren.
It's Kukla.
I'm going to forget. Kulka?
Kukla, I think.
Kukla, who lives on Woodard Ave. She works for a firm in Newton that helps individuals comply with and apply for affordable housing. So I've chatted with her a couple times to try to get some ideas about the thresholds that we need to look at. And it seems feasible that we could get some return on our investment that would come back to CPA for community housing. And we haven't spent any money on community housing out of the multiple years that we've been collecting money. So there's money there in that fund. And then there's also money that's come to the housing partnership as mitigation money over the years, some way back from when
Brook Lane.
Brook Lane was put in, and then some from Highland Commons. And we've used some minimal amounts of that on occasion to pay for some planning and housing related issues, but those funds are both available. So what we're proposing here is that we would take 100,000 from CPA for open space, and then 250,000 from CPA for community housing. And then we'd take 50 out of the mitigation funds for community housing that's in accounts that's controlled by the housing partnership and the planning board. And that would give us the 400,000 that is roughly the price that's being sought for the property. So the town would end up with acreage that was open space, and we'd end up with an affordable unit that we would then sell, and it would remain as an affordable unit in perpetuity. The other option that we have is, if we're able to figure a strategy, we could create a second lot and maybe make that lot available to somebody like Habitat for Humanity. So we'd end up with maybe another single family affordable unit, or even a duplex. Duplex, you'd have the opportunity to offer one of those duplex units to a local citizen as a first choice. You could give them preference. If it's just a single family unit that we were to sell, we're not allowed to do that.
Is that why it says 3? Because it's possibly 3, so it could be the home that's there plus either a single or a duplex, depending on what's built. Okay.
So, I mean, this is all sort of a fresh idea. The numbers, what would happen is we'd spend 100 out of CPA out of open space. We'd spend 150 out of CPA from housing, an additional 100 from housing out of CPA, 50 out of the mitigation money, and hopefully get 100,000 back at the end of the day from the sale of the unit. So if the unit sold for somewhere around, it's going to have to be something like 275 or 265,000. So if 50 were to come from, and then the developer would want to get a certain profit, and we can, usually that's limited to 20%, as I understand it, of the gross sale. So, you know, part of this would be negotiating with the third party. Now, the housing trust is close to being populated, and with that in place, like Eloise said, we wouldn't be acting on this until May at the town meeting, and the family that owns it is willing to wait on the sale until there's some action at town meeting. If we as a committee were to propose that it be placed on the warrant, if we decide we don't want to go forward with it, then I think the family would just go ahead and sell the property sooner rather than later. Is that fair presentation, Carolyn?
Yeah, except, you know, part of the reason I'd like to talk a little bit about the open space portion. So if you're coming into Berlin Center from 495, it's the wooded hill that's behind the 1870 town hall. So, you know, as far as a visual, if that were to be sold to a developer, you know, half of it, the hill is essentially 2 lots, one of which is this. So, you know, theoretically, half of that hill could be clear cut. It also, as far as connectivity to trails, so the trails that are at Highland Ridge that run north to south would be able to cross Carter Street and then go up over this hill. Hopefully, you know, we would be able to work something out as far as an easement or conservation restriction or something with the other property owner. And then it would theoretically be able to be walkable all the way, well, certainly to downtown, to, you know, the center of town, to the schools. So, you know, as far as habitat goes, it's not super yay. But as far as recreation goes, passive recreation, I think it's a valuable piece, and it certainly lends to the scenic value of downtown.
So it's not necessary. So it could be just purchase the home, restrict the other part, and just sell the existing home.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah,
I think the people would definitely get behind the idea of preserving the look and feel of the center of Berlin. I mean, it's core to the aesthetic of our town. And anytime we see something that's visible like that, all of a sudden, I think the concept, I think, you know, people don't think like, oh, it's clear cut. It's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. You know? So,
and you don't know what kind of something could pop up behind the town hall and look different. Like, so do you care about how that looks in your town? So
right, exactly. And then there's the added benefit. So James Holyoke is here in case anybody has any questions about the viability of the house itself.
yeah, why don't you promote James, and then he can chime in with some thoughts, because this has been dear to him for a while now.
Yes.
Well, I think what's interesting about it in general, I think it brings up the idea of, you know, of being able to, one of the functions of this committee to support community preservation and support housing and stuff like that is this issue of you have to have people that are willing to work with you that aren't going to just go to market, because there's no way with our process that we could just hear about something and act. So, so that's interesting.
Right.
Hi, James.
Hello, good
Hi,
to see
James.
everybody again.
Thank you, James. Do you have any, now, there was an inspection, not a formal inspection, but an inspection of the septic. Do you want to say anything about that?
That was actually upgraded to a full Title V today and passed. So I will have the paperwork on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
So obviously, do I think that we'd have a problem selling this? No. I mean, 8.5 acres with a house, like you said, with newer windows, newer siding, it does need work, but with 8.5 acres, I think it would have no problem being marketed. The family is being very generous in wanting to talk to the town first and letting the town say no first before they go to market. But I mean,
And being willing to wait to town meeting.
yes. And we'll have to bring that all to them and lay it out. And obviously they want to probably speak with an attorney about it, but so far they have been very receptive to doing that for the town and for their neighbors, their old neighbors who they were around for a lot. You know, they'd like to keep it the same sort of character of that neighborhood. And Carterville is a very unique section of Berlin in that the houses are very close. And then you do have this section of wilderness behind a lot of them in that area where the lot sizes are very small in comparison.
Yeah.
And a lot of our projects are on the outer, we just did Lyman Linden, but that's out on the edge. You know, there's a lot of different 40 Caves is on the very edges. This is the one section kind of right in the center of town.
I don't want to see what happened to what was 58 South Street and is now 12 houses on Wilson Road.
Correct.
This is the whole issue of, you have to do your homework, because that was a bomb tosser that bomb tossed at town meeting and made everybody doubt it and scared everybody off. I always
Which
feel
is
like,
exactly what I was thinking when I was talking with James about it. I'm like, we have to have someone look at the house and inspect it. We have to know that the septic's valid. We have, there are things that we need to know ahead of time before we just go decide to buy a house.
oh yeah, because somebody's going to ask all those questions.
And how many homes can an affordable housing project be?
Well, I mean, on the face of this, I think we're saying we're going to spend CPA money to preserve some open space, 4.5, maybe 6.5 acres. And we're going to have an affordable house. And then the question is, do we try to create a second lot with a duplex or a single family house on it? And I think that's something that we need to explore more fully over the next 2 weeks. Because I don't have a good handle on that yet in terms of the feasibility. The creation of a second lot with additional frontage, which isn't there on this parcel, you'd end up with a subdivision. You'd have to create at least a road. You might not have to build it, but you'd have to create the base. It just gets far more complex, and that's money that isn't necessarily in anybody's pipeline right now. So
I know reality is there.
But do you have the capacity to purchase it as is without a plan in stone and say you could just carve it off and leave it, or we could investigate that option for, that you're talking about, but if not, then you carve off the house and keep the rest.
I don't know. James would be the expert for that.
I mean, I guess, obviously I represent the seller, first of all, but obviously worst case scenario, you keep 2 acres. You keep 6.5 acres and sell off the house with the 2 acres or whatever, or the 80,000 square feet minimal lot. I believe the town could do that worst case scenario, right, and still keep 6.5 acres with an easement, a trail easement on the side.
I guess that's what I'm. Yeah. Sorry, James.
No, right. You're right. But because James and I have talked about this a little bit, separating the land and selling the house as a fixer-upper, that we could do that. I don't know is if we could sell it in its current state. Obviously cleaned out, because it's got some stuff in it.
But as an affordable, but it would be affordable, which is part of the goal of this, or is it? Does it serve potentially 2 different goals? One's the affordable part if the town owned it, how it would sell it in that regard, versus. I guess I'm asking the questions that I'm asking it because obviously expediency is important, because if there's not a lot of time to put this in front of the town, if you get into these really complex things that you're not going to have answers for, that people can poke holes in, it's better to have a simple, what's your most simple solution that could happen that would be plausible, that would be palatable. And if there's a more complex one that, over the next whatever, you figure that out. But I don't know.
So
absolutely,
we won't be able to use CPA money to purchase a house if it's not sold as an affordable unit. So the house has to be sold as an affordable unit if we're going to use CPA money.
Okay.
Well, we could use workplace housing.
The town won't come up with the money, Eloise, to pay for the rest of the cost. And workforce housing doesn't necessarily create affordable units, big A, it creates affordable units, small a.
What if you paid for it through open space?
I don't think we can buy a house through.
You can't buy a house.
Right.
Even if you're a plan is to cut it off?
I mean, I think somehow we'd have to, I just think it gets more complex. And I think that the simplest way still is to say, we're going to use CPA money for community housing to buy the house. We're going to either follow one or two avenues. One is to talk to work through the system the way Eloise has suggested, where the housing trust hires somebody to do the work, and then they sell the property as an affordable unit through a lottery.
Best way.
Yeah.
And that's neat and clean.
Right. And the simplest path.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but we need the housing trust populated, which, you know, I'm going to ask this Kristen tomorrow to post the notice that we're looking for people for that. And it got put into the census form this time, or the census mailing. So hopefully we can have that committee appointed by the middle part of February. And then they'll have some time to organize. And then the next article that I want to talk about for Community Preservation Act consideration relates to the housing trust as well. So,
but I think what you laid out there, Tim, is a clear mandate of how you would approach it. I mean, it does need the housing trust to deal with it, but it's a simple of, you know, purchase the property, sell the house as an affordable piece. I mean, if you had the ability to then consider another, you know, 2 acres of that, but if, you know, if it gets too complicated, you're not going to make your money back. But
no, and I hope that we can resolve that question in the next 2 weeks, because we've moved quite a ways in the last 2. So, no, but you know, I mean, a week ago when we were at the planning board's Center Village study was one of the, we've sent up a trial balloon to see what the response was. And it's clear people are interested in protecting that centerpiece, like you've said. And I think the notion of trying to deal with the creation of an affordable housing unit in the center of town, which this will be the first time we've created affordable housing in an existing structure on a single family lot. Everything else has always been incorporated into some larger project. So this is a good first step in that regard as well.
But if there's a mandate that meets, you know, what this committee's role is to preserve the feel of the community, and I mean, what could be more than that? I mean, Eloise's reference is exactly, you know, you get that type of development close to the center of town. If you want to know what a clear-cut property is, come down to Gates to River Road and look at what happened when Hudson sold all those acres. Anybody that lived on Little Jenkins Road, Little Jenkins Road in the middle of the woods is now completely exposed. So if you want to know what clear-cut can do to a neighborhood, that's what it does.
Now, there is also the possibility that we could, in order to make the numbers work a little bit better for the renovation, if we have a goal, I'm sorry, if we have a ceiling of about 287, you said, Tim, as to what we could sell it for as an affordable house renovated.
Yeah.
So, and if we say it's going to cost 200, I'm sorry, got nine thoughts happening all at once. If we can renovate it for $50,000, and then the builder needs to get, let's say, $20,000 or $25,000, we can put an offer into the family of $375. And that gives us a little bit more wiggle room to make all of the math work.
Yeah, or look at some of the money that's in the hands of the housing partnership, and instead of doing 50, you'd do slightly more than that.
Right.
But you replenish maybe 100,000 back to CPA for housing instead of, you know, some larger sum. So, but in the next 2 weeks, we'll tie down these numbers more clearly. So when we have to face the reality of whether to put it on the warrant or not, we'll have a clearer idea. Because like I said, we've moved quite a ways in the last 2 weeks. I think we can clean this up quite a bit in the next 2.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Great proposal.
I did have a question about the potential second property, the possible duplex. Why is it that as a duplex we could have one of the things be preferential to someone in Berlin, but not a single property? Why can't we do that?
That's the way the state reg reads.
Do we know? Like, I'm just trying to conceptualize why that regulation would exist to begin with.
Because I guess they're concerned that you'd cut people out of the opportunity if you were just doing single units. I can ask Lauren for a little more detail about how that came to be, but that's the understanding I'd had in the past, and she confirmed that when I chatted with her. So
it just seems to me like a town should be able, if they're making affordable housing, to do that, whether it's one unit or two. You know, I just don't understand the logic, and maybe that's not important, but
I think part of it is because the house is existing.
yeah, no, I'm talking about it.
Yes, but if we do the duplex, I have no idea how the septic would be, how the water would be.
Yeah.
You know, that's beyond my skill set.
Yeah, no, but it's my understanding that if we build a second house and it is a single home instead of a duplex, that we can't give a Berlin resident preference towards that. If it's a duplex, we could give a Berlin resident preference for half of that. And I'm just wondering why we couldn't do it.
I'll do some more research on that. We're almost at 8:30. Do we have other things we want to discuss about in regard to this proposal that we can answer?
Especially for James, since he's here.
So we're good. We'll clean this up and be prepared to present a little finer detail the next time we meet. But
when should do you have any kind of timeline that I can give the family of?
So the committee will vote if we meet in 2 weeks, which is what we're proposing, because the warrant closes on the 13th of February. So if we met in 2 weeks and finalized stuff, that would be great. And if we needed a little more time, we'd have it. If we wait 3 weeks, we really run out of time in terms of that. So essentially the committee's going to make a recommendation in 2 weeks. That's our goal. And that would be when you'd be able to say to the family, CPA is committed to trying to to go to town meeting and ask for this. And I think our sense is a committee, and we're pretty dispersed in our views about, who we chat with, but there's probably a willingness on the part of the town to go forward with this.
Do you do a signed offer or anything? Would you be doing a signed offer before the town meeting? How do you have to work it with the town on?
We've never bought a house before.
I was just gonna say, because there's no SBT involved and there's none of that. So,
but they could get on the ground floor of our first house purchase.
they're very committed to working with the town on this. I just got to keep them in the loop and let them know kind of what's happening. And
I mean, I guess my view as somebody on the committee and relatively new is just that the fact is that the committee from this conversations, definitely wants to explore it. It's not like, we don't think it's anything we would want to get involved with, because I mean, the fact that our funds have to get voted by town meeting, you wouldn't really be able to sign anything because there'd be no way to, as with any real estate transaction, you need to have funding source, and we wouldn't have a funding source until after the town meetings. And that's the issue.
Right, but they will have our vote.
They'd have our vote to know that we're going to move forward. I mean, you'd either know whether we're going to move forward or not. If we don't put it on the warrant, then it's a dead issue.
Well, and then in the interim between our vote and town meeting, there would hopefully be some commitment on the part of the select board, the finance committee, and capital planning
Sure, because you'd have to have those kinds of recommendations all lined up, or it'll explode, it'll blow up and go into nothing.
I think it's fair for us to go to those three committees and say, we want an action on your part sooner rather than later. This is not raise and appropriate. This is expending funds that are in hand through CPA, but we'd like you to review these issues and vote for your approval or disapproval sooner rather than later, so James can relay to the family what those committees feel as well. So
right,
yeah, I think as an ex-member of CPA, I do feel that this is a easier use of funds rather than funding a big affordable housing project or doing anything else like that. This is kind of what we talked about, me and Eloise, before, about either helping people in existing homes or fixing up homes rather than trying to do some big construction project that would be years or months or anything like that. So,
sure.
Good.
And saving the scenic value of downtown.
Yeah, I mean, not even getting into the whole saving 6 acres of center of town, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing more characteristic than that in town, I'm not really sure of, you know, right adjacent to Powder House Hill. I don't really know what else would be. So, but I do think your last comment, Tim, is really important, because that's again where it would fall short if all the other committees hadn't been asked their opinion and, you know, were behind the concept of doing it. It wouldn't fly when it gets to the vote. So,
well, do you know how we managed to when we bought the Bullard House?
How did we buy the Bullard House? So there was an article at the, you know, on the town meeting warrant to expend X amount of money to buy it, and we simply did out of whatever. I mean, it wasn't out of any special fund, and I don't think we got a match from anybody. We just
it was basically, I thought, free cash.
Yeah.
And the Historical Society came up with basically half of it. The town paid for the other half. And part of the warrant article was that we would pay the electricity and the heat and the insurance.
Did the purchase and sale get signed before the money was voted through town meeting? How did that work?
That's a good question, and I don't have the answer.
You know, my sense is that we waited and go ahead.
So normally we do some sort of offer, and it would be contingent on town approval or town meeting approval or something like that. And that would kind of just lay the groundwork of what the price was going to be, maybe a deposit, but that would be obviously refundable if the town didn't vote on it or anything. So, I mean, I just didn't know how you guys were going to approach it on that end.
So the ideal thing would be for the housing trust to do that.
Okay.
Right.
And if we have that committee up and running by the middle of February, and some other things fall into place, then we'd be in a position to have that committee, that trust, take that action, because that's one of the duties and responsibilities they have that's outlined in the bylaw that created them.
All right.
Okay, so we got some homework, but that's good.
Okay.
Good. Good
to see everyone.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
8:35, we've got an 8:30 appointment.
Yep. Bob is here.
Bob's here, so do you want to elevate Bob?
Yep.
There he is.
Hello.
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
How are you?
We're great.
Very good.
Do you have materials that you want to share on the screen, or do you want to just have us enjoy your conversation with us?
Maybe a little bit of both, if that's okay.
All right.
So I would ask if the committee had an opportunity to see the proposal that I submitted on behalf of REC. I can run through it briefly as an overview if you'd want, or if you've all seen it, I won't bore you to death.
No, I'd say, why don't you go through it? We've seen it, but it never does any harm to be refreshed.
All right, I'll skip to the good parts. Let's see. We're going to try anyways. Let's start with this Word document. So Recreation submitted a request for funds from CPAC to CPAC back in late November. And the concept of what we are proposing is, I'm going to scroll down to the pictures, is a pavilion to be installed out in South Commons, roughly where shown here in the photo. Are you all able to see this okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this kind of aqua rectangle or teal blue rectangle in the photo below, the overhead photo below, represents roughly where we would want to put the pavilion between the school playground and the pond, and kind of proximal to the courts there.
That's the school playground in the bottom of the photo.
Exactly.
That's
yes.
this. Yeah.
I figured you all spend as much time at that playground as I do, but that's probably not safe.
No.
That is the school playground here. We'll just focus in on this for a minute. So the school playground is here. The barn is here next to the parking lot, and then we have this parking lot here. And the vision that we have at Recreation for the pavilion is really a common space that could be used for lots of different purposes by all different people within a community, primarily providing shelter from the sun. If you've been down here in the summer, it does get brutally hot, and there's nowhere to hide from the sun. And so certainly we see families that want to bring their kids to the playground during summer vacation, but sort of limit things because there's just not a way to escape the heat. We see the pavilion being used to support things like the fishing derby. I could see a community group meeting there to have a discussion or a talk, a meeting, a craft group. We could see after school enrichment programs for kids taking place in there from time to time. And so what we're proposing is not just this steel structure that provides the shade, but also a poured concrete pad beneath it, an improved walkway from that pad to the parking lot to make it easier for people to get out into really a little further into the wilderness and away from the parking lot. The proposal comes with 6 commercial grade picnic tables that would stay under the pavilion for seating, as well as a solar powered light for safety and security. Really not so much to light it up for events, but just a light that's a no maintenance, kind of always on after dusk light in the pavilion. The inspiration for the pavilion came from our neighboring town, Clinton. This picture here is of their pavilion at Savage Field, it's called. They have a baseball field here, and they've put this up. And this is used pretty regularly by folks in the community. Families will have a birthday party here, just a place to congregate and get together outside of your home. So we sort of put this proposal together, and an estimated cost to erect such a structure at about just under $124,000. The pavilion itself is about $45K, $40,000 in concrete, and a handful of other items here. When Mr. Wheeler contacted me and wanted me to bring this to the meeting, we talked about a few open questions that the committee might have, and so I had a little homework to do, and I can run you through that now. So the first question was, whose land is this, and can we actually put it there? Because there was thought to be maybe a relationship between the town land and the school that we just had to be cognizant of. Mark Adams, another recreation member, and I attended a selectmen meeting on the 9th of January, spoke with them about the process and our plans, and they were able to confirm that the entire parcel Here is town land. There is no lease with the school, and so we're within our rights to do this. After talking through the proposal, the select board voted unanimously to support and approve the process, provided that we meet, regulatory compliance, basically. One of the items that came up was whether or not there would be a challenge or any obstacles we'd have to maneuver around regarding conservation. And so perhaps we can talk about that. That's one thing we've not been able to close on yet, but it is a discussion point. The structure has a 10-year warranty for finish and materials, so we would expect to really not have to touch it for 10 years. More likely it'll be, well beyond that. But we don't see, any type of major capital reinvestment in this for a period of time measured in decades. Tim and I did speak about snow removal. It's unclear, what the usage patterns will be in the winter months. If the DPW was amenable to running a snow blower up the path and clear off the pad, we could see that being really beneficial. As families use the pond for ice skating, this could be a great spot to just drop your bags and have a seat and chat with one another.
Bob, can I just interrupt for 1 sec?
Please do.
Does that parking lot get plowed in the winter?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if it does.
I think it does, because when we skate, we park there.
Right. That's right, Julie. Yeah, absolutely.
I think they do plow that, Carolyn.
Right. So that means, so the DPW is already taking care of that.
Yeah, but do they plow it on a regular basis or just as a one shot? I know the Lions used to have a skating party, and then Bob Rainville would open up the back of his car and he'd get out his trusty grill and he'd grill up hot dogs, cocoa for the kids.
Love it. I love it.
But that was a one-shot deal.
Right. But so just a question, how big a deal it would be to incorporate if they do plow that regularly. How big a deal?
Yeah, that's what you have to find out.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Carolyn, do you know, I don't know if now is the right time to talk about it, but is there anything offhand you can think of that would we'd have to consider regarding conservation and putting a pavilion like this in this area?
You definitely need to come and talk to conservation. And so the part of this project that conservation would be concerned about is, while the digging is happening for the pad, that just to make sure that no silt, none of the dirt washes into the pond.
Right.
So, it might just be some minimal silt fencing. It depends on how disrupted the area would get. But I guarantee you that conservation will work with you on this, and we'll make it as easy and painless as possible.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, probably just some silt fencing.
Okay. All right.
Would be what we can
schedule that.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I want to share some other details with you on a different application. One of the other areas that Tim and I spoke about was just kind of the general design, and what we started with something that is basic, frankly, trying to just be mindful of costs and responsible with the town's money. And hopefully you can see this end view here. It says end elevation 25 by 44. Orlando, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the profile of the structure that we proposed. It's a 25 by 44 foot footprint, 4 and 12, pretty basic, gable roof, steel roof, It's exactly what's in Clinton that you can drive by and see. And this is roughly $45,000 in steel and materials. We did go back to the supplier and talk to them about what options exist if we, wanted to prioritize the form of the pavilion a little more and get a little more design. And where we landed was this version of the pavilion. This has a few upgrades to the basic model. It's taller overall. It has an 8 and 12 pitch roof instead of 4 and 12. It has this steel ornamentation on the gable ends and then the cupola on top. It's clearly a nicer looking pavilion and probably matches the town's aesthetic a bit more than what we proposed. This is about $24,000 more. So this is $69,000 in materials. And so and then I'm gonna go back to my Word document here. Sorry for jumping around. Where is it?
So one question I would have, just looking at it because of the outlay, would it have to go out? I mean, this is what you're proposing, but it would have to go out to bid, I assume, because of the amount, right?
Right. Yeah. If we went to it would. I don't think there's any way around it, to be honest.
I'm just saying maybe there'd be a different vendor with a slightly different look or whatever, but at least it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, that's possible. And I mean, I know this company isn't the only supplier that makes these things, and I think you're probably right. There are a number of vendors that make a, similar New England style structure. So just the sum of costs from the proposal are here. Like I said, totaling about $124K. This includes a, anticipated inflation contingency, as all of the suppliers and contractors I spoke with said, if it's next year, plan for more because costs are going up as we were learning. After my chat with Tim last week, I wanted to shore up a few areas. And so I've shown here that now if we were to upgrade to the more, aesthetically pleasing pavilion, that $45K goes to $69. I had an estimate of $2,500 for the electrical hookup of the solar lights. I got an actual quote from O'Sullivan Electrical in Boylston. He's estimating about $1,500, so about $1,000 less than I estimated. And the one area that I still am kind of hand waving, to be honest, is this engineering plans and drawings line item of $5K. I think this is probably a conservative number and can cover it, but I've chatted with a few engineering firms and without drawings specifically or a mandate from our building department on exactly what we want them to do, it's been challenging to get even a budgetary number from these firms. So we'll continue to do it.
The company that sells the product, do they do the installation as well?
They can, but in this case, I have $10K allocated for a local contractor to do the assembly. It just bolts together.
Okay, are they also able to supply plans?
Yes, so for the cost of the structure, we'll have stamped drawings, and plans, as well as concrete plans for the people that are doing the pad, and they know where to put the bolts, so the pavilion can get literally bolted together.
Right. So then why do you need to have additional engineering plans?
So I looked at, I actually have a copy of what Clinton did, and the town of Clinton required their contractor to do some seismic and wind load calculations. I have the data, I have all of the output of that work, but it's possible that the town of Berlin would want us to do something similar. And so that's what I've got the $5K allocated for.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have thought of it had it had the
Right. Well, I
my-
just would imagine with a company that makes makes and designs those for installation, that they would have standard engineered drawings already as part of the package.
They do, and what I think what these plans what they offered to the project was the connection of the pavilion that's standalone that comes from the supplier, that combined with the concrete pad and the size of the footings proved to me basically that pavilion and your footings are going to survive anticipated wind loads, anticipated seismic loads apparently as well. And so the engineer actually defined the size of the footings and the design of the pad so it can support that pavilion. And I've based the concrete estimates and the quote we have on the concrete work based on the worst case footing size as defined by the engineers that did that project.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, again, just curious.
Yeah, I get it. So I think that's all I had to present, unless I'm forgetting something. Any other questions?
I mean, I would say, I was somebody that when I saw it, I just had the question of, it was very Yankee and that it was very thrifty and bare bones with the initial proposal. And, I think part of the thought that I had is, remember, this committee is if it's community preservation and try to enhance the community, I think, whatever gets installed there, even if, there's no landscaping budget to make it look any better or really make it more beautiful or stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm not saying, you're proposing what you're proposing, but I do think that, if you're going to create a public space like that, then to think about the aesthetics is really important, because otherwise it just becomes something utilitarian. And so, it's great that it's that, but I think it becomes less attractive if it's not itself as attractive in landscaping and things like that. And, I think the point of the maintenance stuff is interesting to, make sure, like, you pour concrete walkway and somebody puts salt on it, well, there goes your concrete walkway. So is pavers better than that? Or, I'm not saying I expect you to come back and do something different. I mean, these are just my ideas, but, the more appealing you make it, I think that's part of the purview of, why people voted for this money to do things like that are attractive, that you can really look at and say, wow, this is great. Like, I think that the second proposal, with a more New England feel is great. I think, as somebody that works in insurance, a better pitch on the roof to, prevent, heavy snow load from collapse. I think that in and of itself, just visually, that just came right to my head. So, I'm more in support of this, but, but I think, I think the more it's more appealing, I think people, some people would look at it and say, well, the aesthetics, I just want a basic bare bones, whatever. But I think that, this is about character of the town. So that's important.
It's a great point. And, I mentioned that we were kind of inspired by the one in Clinton and really looking at and considering its function. And it wasn't until, we went back and looked at what other options were on the table and we came up with the second set of drawings that I showed you. And I realized that what we were proposing looks like a carport, basically. And
a very sturdy one, though.
I wish I had, yeah, exactly. And at the field where it's installed in Clinton, there's a lot going on there. And so it kind of blends in, whereas this is literally going to be in the middle of a green space with, nothing around it. So I think I appreciate your suggestion and your thinking, because if we can find the funds, I do agree that, something that has a little more charm, it would probably blend in and look a lot nicer longer term.
Well, if it's going to be guaranteed for at least 10 years and you're expecting it to be around in decent shape for, many more years to come, like, if it was going to be something that lasted a couple of years, $20,000 would seem like a lot. If it's going to be sitting there 20 years, say, you know, it doesn't really seem that much more expensive, you know.
Right.
I mean, it's aesthetics have value.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agreed. It's a nicer plan for not a heck of a lot more money in the over the life of the building.
And I guess that was, sorry.
I was just going to say, if it's like 20,000 over 20 years, I know that this isn't like of how much each person in town paying, that would be, you know, what, 30 cents a year or something for each resident for 20 years to make it look better.
But I think if we're going to fund it as part, I mean, I think that, you know, if we're getting proposals like fences around a community garden and things like that, and other types of things that are to maintain the feel of the community, I think, you know, additional structures like this. I mean, even that's why I guess I mentioned the bid process. It's like, just because this is the look, if you find a better vendor that has an even nicer look or whatever, I think those things need to be part of it. You know, I would even consider, I mean, you didn't really have landscape or anything in there. But, you know, of pavers versus concrete, you know, maybe that's a different option. I mean, you know,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So like to Wayne's point, you know, you were at what, 148 and change.
Mhm.
If you round it up to 150 and put in $1,500 worth of, you might not even need that much for some bushes or, you know, just some, again, it's not that much more money
Right.
to just
Yeah.
beef it up just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about landscaping and
Yeah.
she would look beautiful with some shrubs.
Probably
No,
also,
or-
Bob will have to consider, sorry, handicap accessibility too, which we didn't talk about.
But I mean, you're putting and that's the other thing too, you're putting in a concrete pad. I mean, you know, that's important under the thing. If you put gravel around it or something else that, you know, extends that to make it more of a community space, you know, I would assume that area gets pretty muddy in the spring. So, you know, is there any way to extend it, you know, to make it more of a community area? It's just, I mean, those are just thoughts. I mean, to just throw out too.
Yeah. These are great
concrete
thoughts.
Right, the concrete pad's going to be at grade or no?
I think it'll probably end up being a few inches above grade, Carolyn. I don't know if technically we call that at grade, but my guess is there'll be, you know, maybe a 4-inch step from the grass onto the concrete that we could consider transitioning with crushed stone or something else like was suggested.
Right. Well, just to Julie's point about being handicapped accessible, if it's at grade, you know, or there's I don't know if gravel coming up to level it off counts to make it accessible or not, but you know, just something else to think about, you know, just that little, if you put the pad at grade, does that solve your accessibility issue?
Got it.
Does it create other issues? I don't really know.
If God forbid it sinks and you have a
Right.
skating pond under the thing, you know, you don't want that either.
Right. Yep, but just some things to think about.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why you need the engineer.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is my first time taking something like this through the process. I love your suggestions, and I'll keep adding more to this project if you let me. You know, where do we go from here? How do I incorporate these suggestions? Is there a final proposal process that I go through, or could you just share with me how the process works a little bit?
So as we were talking earlier, the warrant closes on the 13th of February, and we have to have articles submitted to the select board prior to that. We're proposing to meet again at the end of January. And then if we needed to force another meeting in February prior to that 13th deadline. So we've got another 2 weeks, really. I mean, it looks to me right now that you're looking at 150, but I don't see any harm in you having some conversation with some of your other committee members and perhaps some of the vendors, and just getting an idea to close out some of these questions that are still hanging over us. It doesn't seem as though your dollar figure is going to change dramatically, but you know, I think the question about landscaping, you know, you can go talk to Gillis and you know, see if they'd meet you halfway on some modest landscaping at the site. You could, I know I've seen recreational walkways that are, and I don't know what the product is, but I know there was a handicap accessible walkway in Kentucky that we went on that took people up onto quite a hill, and it was just an even grade, but it was a rubberized composite material that had been utilized.
Oh, look, Carolyn.
So
especially not that close to the water.
You guys know something about this.
Petroleum-based product is gonna leach and kill all the fish in that 6-inch deep pond.
This is from
they die anyways because it's not deep enough.
Parking lot to the pad, not from the pad to the pond. I don't know. I'm just saying this.
Right. I'd rather see an at-grade just tar, you know, instead of a poured concrete, just a extension of what would eventually, I assume that parking lot will get paved. Yeah. You know, I'd rather just see a paved
walkway.
Yeah.
Is there a timeline? I've heard people mention that paving of that parking lot a few times. Is there an actual work stream to get that done?
Well, I mean, you stimulated conversation at the selectmen's meeting about the removal of the barn.
I didn't mean to do that.
Well, but, I mean, that's keen on their list. So, you know, as they look at that possibility, I would think they'd look at an enhancement of the whole area. And Complete Streets is trying to suggest improvement of the sidewalk network that would come from the center of town. So, you know, you'd assume that you wouldn't want a sidewalk to just empty onto a dirt pad that's currently the parking lot that's there. So.
Right. And like, I know the parking lot at the town offices was paved through a grant. I'm not really sure what the grant was about, but there are options like that come up that might be able to get that parking lot paved. But I guess I would, and Tim, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would proceed with the expectation that at some point in the life of this pavilion, that parking lot will be paved.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Well, some of us won't be here to see that, but so Bob, thank you. Other questions or suggestions for Bob before he departs?
I think he needs to know that they have to do a warrant article.
Right.
Or is that only going to be submitted as part of the capital planning?
No, it's
community preservation.
CPA will submit the warrant article.
Oh.
Only
okay.
CPA can submit this warrant article on behalf of CPA. And if we don't vote to put the article on the warrant, then no one else can, using CPA money.
Correct.
So
should we give Bob a date to come back? Does he have to come back to CPA with everything finalized? He needs a date.
I would say that there's several different questions that have been raised. So having Bob come back when we meet the next time, if we haven't voted on when that next time is going to be. We've talked about the 31st, I think, but Um,
And Bob, I would like you to be able to just email me what you used tonight so I can have that in my backup files, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
No problem.
I
And then
think
if you do have changes, proposals, get that to me too, and I can always get it out to the members in advance.
yeah, I
next
think
time.
we're all pleased with the direction you're headed, because, you know, everybody the last time we looked at this felt that an upgrade in the structure would be beneficial, and I think you've moved in the right direction. And that increase is modest, as MJ has pointed out. I mean, it's, some people might say, you know, 25,000 is a lot of money, but it's over the life of the project, it's small dollars, and enhances the visual quite a bit. I think we all agree with that. So that's good.
I think anytime you're going to propose anything that's going to last that long, you want that to be part of it, because I think that's part of the selling point. Because if people don't like it, they won't vote for it, because they'll just think, so. You got to
appreciate
get people,
the feedback.
Get people excited about it.
Other questions or comments? So I'd say, if we were to meet on the 31st, is that an evening that's available for you, Bob?
Certainly, yeah, I can make it available.
And we'd say 8 o'clock.
I can do that. Tuesday night as well.
Yep.
Okay. And so at that
Actually, why don't we say 7:45?
Or perhaps in advance to that meeting, I can revise this proposal with the details we've spoken about.
Right.
Sort out some of the remaining, questions and suggestions, integrate them, and have one final proposal with one set of numbers, and have that. I'll submit that in advance of the 31st, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, if you can get that to Maureen, then she can distribute it to the committee. That would be great. Good.
Okay. Got it.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Great job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Okay,
Good
take
night.
care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good. Very good.
Yeah, that was nice to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that looks good.
I don't know if you think I'm off base with the things I'm saying. You're not saying anything about spending more on land. I mean, but I mean, I don't want to take it in a direction that we don't feel comfortable with, but.
No, I would much prefer spending the extra 25,000 or whatever it is to have it. I mean, I think this is where we get from the point of it look to utilitarian to it looks, fitting with. I mean, I'm sure if we threw another 25,000, there would be something else that I think this is probably the good middle ground between function and aesthetics.
All right. Regional Housing Coordinator. This isn't I want to inform everybody, because this has to do with some sort of a long range picture. The Central Mass Regional Planning Commission is in receipt of a grant from the state, and they will use the funds to hire a regional housing coordinator that will become sort of a circuit rider between a number of towns. They've asked us if we would, Berlin, be interested in joining in with probably Shrewsbury, Grafton, Millville, Auburn, maybe one other. So you'd essentially end up with someone that was available for what they're talking about is 4 or 5 hours a week. And in the first year, the grant pays for it. In the second and third year, we would need to come up with somewhere around $30,000. I think the thought that we've had is that 20 might come from CPA and 10 might come from the housing partnership funds that are from mitigation. And the 20,000 wouldn't be needed until, it wouldn't be needed in this fiscal year. It would be needed in fiscal 24. But I'd like us to think about it and in principle approve the expenditure of, or the thought of spending money in fiscal 24 and 25 in order to assure Central Mass that we'd be a participant for 3 years, which would help them stabilize the position and not feel as though it would be jeopardized after a year with a bunch of towns bailing on them.
I guess my question, can I just say is because I did read the proposal, and so if it's 4 hours and it's, you know, $16,000 a year, I don't know if I was reading in here about, you know, benefits or whatever else, just like, so if that's 4 hours is $16,000, it's like, what is the salary on this thing? You know, I'm
and
like,
can
wow.
I have that
So,
job?
yeah, because if it's 4 times 10, that's, you know, that's like, you know, $160,000+ job or more. So I'm like, I don't know if that's really where it's at, but I was like, wow.
And that's the part that worried me, but the position would pay somewhere around 65 with the benefit package, and then they end up, because of the way they operate as a semi-state institution with indirect costs that they have to plug in as well, their indirect rate bumps it up to the point where they end up having to look at this figure in order to charge the towns. And so I said, you know, that would be the stumbling block in my mind, and the only way to justify it is the notion that we're getting 3 years out of it rather than we're paying for 2 and getting 3. So although that figure looks substantially higher, you can reduce it by, you know, a percentage as a result of the fact that the first years we're not paying for. That's
well, I guess, but I mean, yeah, I guess I'm just saying if you're going to feel that there's value, I mean, I don't know 100%, you know, obviously this is, you know, housing to help with this whole thing that we're trying to help. I mean, I don't know if it, and it's, I guess we're helping in partnership with the Housing Trust or whatever, I suppose is, I guess, sort of the view here. But, you know, again, but like when you read this proposal and it says, you know, they provide, I just lost it here, but they provide the benefits, the office space, the necessary equipment. I mean, so do they have other funding, or is it really the fee that they're charging us is paying that? Because to me, if you're telling me that the salary is 65,000 and what I just calculated, if it's 40-hour week job, it's $100,000 over that salary. I'm like, well, what the heck are they covering by us, or do they really have money that's covering it? That's because that's $16,000 a year. I mean, it's. I know what you're saying, you're paying less because there's a grant, but you're still paying $16,000 a year. So I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm not saying whatever, but it's just, I don't know. Somebody would look at that like I did in about 30 seconds and be like, what's going on? So
yep, no, I agree with you. Because I mean, what they say on that supplemental information page on the back is the starting salary range will be 50 to 75. So
where's your calculation if you're providing all this? I mean, are we really, because if it's that, then don't tell us you're providing it. Just say you're funding the whole enchilada. Don't act like you're not.
Right. And like I said, the first year's covered with the grant. The second and the third year are the ones they want us to be committed to. I'll go back to them and say, you know, that we've got to have firmer numbers here just so we understand where that excess comes from. You know, I mean, if you're only going to pay 50 to 75, how is it that, I mean, why wouldn't we be better off just hiring somebody
right
for twice the time?
I mean, yeah,
for the same amount of money.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying that the benefits and that stuff, it doesn't have a value, but don't position it that you're paying the benefits and everything out of some other pot if we're ultimately paying for it. I don't know. It just does.
No, I mean, I think
maybe I'm naive.
They may have explained it incorrectly, but I mean that essentially they're saying the money that we pay in that second and third year is going to cover all those other. They're supplying those costs, but they're not paying for them. We are. So I'll raise that issue with them, because the way I understand it is that the reason it's so high is because we are going to be assigned those costs. They're not picking them up independently.
I mean, yeah. I mean, at over 100% on top of the salary, that's like 150% of the salary. That's a lot.
So Tim, you had mentioned before that you were going to see if the housing consortium that we're already a member of, if there was an overlap in benefits.
So what they do is they manage the subsidized housing inventory. We're putting into that pocket this year, I think Kristen and I talked the other day, and it's going to be somewhere around 7,000.
Right.
So they help manage the subsidized housing inventory. They send out letters. I think they're in the process of doing that. They send out letters to everybody that's in an affordable unit in town. So we begin to monitor those individuals, which is, I think, something that Eloise has always felt we wanted to be able to do, so we could make sure that the units continue to, I mean, we don't want a unit to be sold and not comply with the affordability requirements, that sort of thing. Because you get off onto a tangent pretty fast if you aren't monitoring those. And we don't have the capacity to monitor. And this proposal,
I can acknowledge that at this meeting. I mean, I've been on since 2002, and the report requirements are getting burdensome.
Right.
It's beyond the skill of Linda Nelson, Trudy Turbo, and myself. We're not ladies, but, you know.
So that's the service that we get from Assabet Regional Housing Consortium. I look at this opportunity as a means to get the housing trust on its feet and off to a real positive start, particularly if we've got this housing unit that we potentially might be buying and need to manage through the process of complying as an affordable unit and eventually being sold. So
will the housing trust have its own budget though to pay for something like this as well, or is it just us?
So the trust, there's no funds for the trust other than the money they can peel off from the CPA. And
okay,
they might very well argue with the, that they have a line item in the town budget at some point, but
okay,
that's not there yet.
That just helps me understand that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not arguing it. I'm not saying it's not good to have knowledgeable expertise of somebody that knows what they're doing and everything. And I'm not dumb enough to think, the benefits don't cost something. It's just the way I read that. I'm like, then just.
Well, it's a scary number for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, especially if you start doing the calculations of, does it make sense for 40 hours? How many people, in how many towns is it again that's paying toward this?
They got 4 right now.
Okay. And
we would be 5. Are they looking for 5?
We'd be 5. And I think
so. I guess that's the thing, is that if you're only looking for 5, and if they're getting estimates for the dollars are, so if they get more towns doing this, does it bring the cost down if you've got it split more? Because how much are our needs going to be in our infancy? You know what I mean? Versus
we don't have 4 hours every week.
It's on average.
Yes. But when we need them, we need them. And it's not that I can't do it, but what would take me 8, 12, 15 hours might take them 2 or 3 because they know the lingo. They have the reports for the other towns.
I get it. I'm not anti this thing. It's,
I see it as complementary to Assabet. They're doing slightly different things. And that's in relation to Carolyn's overlap ideas. Because now DHCD wants us, the town, to monitor all the apartments to make sure nobody's getting away with something. They're tightening up everything. And like I said, I just don't have the skill or the time to do it. At this point, I'm trying to pull back a bit.
I'm on board.
We'll look at a new unit, and the rental or the house purchases, and we just have to confirm they were the same. And now they want so much more. And the blood of my firstborn, and he's just dead set against it.
So I'll talk to my friends at Central Mass and say, break down that figure so we completely understand how you come to that exorbitant number. Because we can look at their indirect cost. They said that one of the things they were considering was hiring an outside contractor to do this rather than an employee, and that would change the number substantially, because they wouldn't end up with some of those additional costs that they have to throw on to a project.
Sure.
And they said that this number was in their mind, the worst case scenario, which they wanted to use, and that as they fine tune it, and they might have fine tuned it already to some degree. So I can check with them on that as well. If people think I should continue to pursue that, I will. If not, then, we can forego it and not bother. But
well, I mean, I'd like to know more about the money, because this is all kind of new territory for me. I don't have any real conception as to whether, it sounds from what Eloise has said that this is something that's useful, but I have no background to understand whether it is useful for the amount being talked about.
Good. All right. Anybody else?
I would just say too, Tim, you just made a really interesting point. If they're giving you information saying, well, if it's in-house, it's this, if we're not sure what we're doing, and this is the, cover our butt, but then we've assigned up for this and not knowing what they're doing, that's kind of another.
Yeah, we wouldn't sign the contract until they've got all their ducks in a row in terms of how they're actually, and they may very well have made some further decisions. I talked to Connor 3 weeks ago, so it's.
Yeah, because I could see the pricing structure being different, but a contractor, could be more appealing than, whatever. And so, given how tough it is to find people to fill roles, maybe that's more, maybe they're feeling that's more safe. So anyhow, yeah, I'd say go for it.
All right, I'll get some more information on that. And then the last article that we've got, of course, which we've talked about in the past, is this community garden fence, and the figures been updated to the 45,000, and Carl gave us that updated proposal, and so we'll be talking about that the next time we meet as well.
What was his original request? Was it for 40 or 42?
Was it 38 or something?
And he had some money built in for inflation.
Right.
Just curious.
It's been
about a year.
A year over, yeah. It's like a year.
And if it comes in less, they return the money to the town. But I'd rather give them a little bit more, because everything's been coming in on all of our bids under. What the town voted was under what the bid came in for.
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's.
You go back to town meeting and ask for money, and.
Yeah, right. That's just bad.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And he's been very patient.
Yeah, he worked with us in delaying his proposal so we could move forward on the Horseshoe Pond piece and stuff. So
that
was
good. And then we didn't have a fall town meeting, so
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So his quote was 41, and then you guys told him to increase it just to cover it. So
Good.
That's what.
Okay, good. Awesome.
And I'll be sure to let him know about the next meeting too, so he can come in if he feels the need, but probably might.
He's already come in and I thought we already approved it.
No, your vote for the warrant wasn't done.
Yeah, we didn't put it on a warrant.
But I don't
Well,
think
there
we
was
need more
no warrant to put it on when we voted.
Well, what we did is we assured him in principle that we supported it, but we never took a vote that put it on, that moved it to that next stage of a recommendation to a town meeting. So
Okay.
But we
That's
don't
what
really,
we'll-
but we don't really need any more information unless he's got any other update. I mean, I guess it's more like notify him to say, if there's anything else, this is this is your last chance to change the
Yeah.
amount, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The only reason you might have him come in is just so that you can say, hey, by the way, you might have to say something at town meeting.
Right.
He just changed,
Yeah.
the committee just changed chairman because his term is up and he is not going for renewal.
Oh,
Do you know
Right.
who the new chair is?
but
Yes, I do.
He'd be chair through town meeting.
huh?
No, James, according to the minutes I saw, James Wheeler is going to be chairman as of February 1, which happens to be his 36th birthday.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
And my understanding is that there was a negotiation and that maybe Carl agreed to help explain this anyway. He wasn't
Possibly.
abandoning ship
Right.
completely.
Yeah. And the chair doesn't have to be the one that gets
Right.
up and talks about it at town meeting.
No, 'cause he's checking in voters.
That's right. Yep. And for the record, the warrant closes on my 55th birthday this year.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
So
So,
right now, it looks as though we'd have potentially an article for Carter Street, an article for the pavilion, and an article for the fence.
And all those numbers make sense with our outstanding funds, so.
And I believe they do, and that's Maureen and my job to confirm that. We really have to tie June down and get some assurance, because we can't make a recommendation at town meeting without a sense that the money is there. So we
That
will,
would kind of be bad.
I'm gonna talk to Kristen tomorrow and say, help me out with this. And if we need to go to the state to confirm some stuff, we'd have her help us with that in terms of how to interpret revenue availability to CPA. So those would be the three articles that would be on the warrant, and let's jump to are people available for a meeting on January 31st?
Yes,
What day of the week is that?
Tuesday.
2 weeks from
Oh,
tonight.
the last Tuesday. Okay, yep,
Yep.
I could be available.
Ellie?
7:30 meeting time still?
Well, not necessarily. We bumped it to 7:30 tonight because Bob wasn't going to be available till 8:30. So
I'm for earlier if we can.
you want to do 7?
I can't really guarantee I'd be able to be here before 7:30.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
then we'll do 7:30, and we've got Bob at 7:45. So that
We'll
gives
just
us-
have to be concise.
we'll get a few things taken care of and then jump into Bob and then a couple of these other things.
I mean,
Oh,
if that-
wait.
What?
Is the historical committee going to ask for the 130,000?
No,
They're not going to do that question at all?
no, there is no intent on the part of the Historical Commission to ask for any more money at this time.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure they were covered.
Yeah, I talked to June and the 200 that they've got is adequate to move forward with the they've got an preliminary engineering report. They've been working with an architect. They've emptied the building. So there's all the collection that was in there is out of it now. They'll be doing some more work with the engineer. Then they'll probably try to begin to pin down some figures, and then they'll be using a substantial amount of that money to apply for a match from the state, which would be around it would be a year from now, I think.
Oh,
So they'll continue to spend some money on engineering and maybe some preliminary work.
Yeah, but they're going to use it. The money they're using is the money they've already received.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
So the 31st is our next meeting.
7:30.
7:30.
7:30. Do we have any public input? We don't have anybody from the public here, right?
We do not.
Do any committee members wish to update us on anything? I had a question for Bob that I didn't ask him, but I can ask Julie. Julie, the scoreboard is in place.
Julie
Julie
had to go pick up her son.
Oh, tricky.
she did the Irish goodbye.
Yeah. She sent me a text. She's like, I tell everybody I had to go pick up my son.
What time was that, Carolyn?
Oh, hold on. I'll tell you. She texted me at 9:20, 9:18. So 20 past. Yeah.
I don't see
Quarter
anything
past.
in the chat.
No,
It was,
it's right
it was
here.
it was an Irish goodbye. That was it.
Yeah.
You were too busy chairing the meeting. Tim.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to me as though the announcer's booth has been constructed. I just wanted to get an update on that. But I'll ask her about that again. Because in our annual report, I think we've said something about it being
Installed.
and we want to make sure that that's accurate. So we'll check that.
Right.
They can update us at our next meeting along with your bid proposal.
Yeah, except our annual report has to be submitted before then. So,
All right.
well,
It's
actually,
actually that day.
Yeah.
yeah,
So me talking to the select board is after that or before?
yeah, probably after.
No, the annual report is different than the
Oh,
The plan.
right?
The plan, yeah.
But we won't throw you to the wolves in the next 2 weeks. We'll put it in February,
Good.
okay?
I'm used to the wolves, no worries.
Yeah. What
Uh,
else?
On a personal note, I'm a grandparent again. I have my
All right.
Oh, congratulations.
we had our fifth last night at 8 o'clock, a boy. So everybody's
Wow.
good. So
Oh,
I know.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can't
Now,
wait
how
to
does
see the
someone as
pictures on
young
Facebook.
as you have that many grandchildren, you know?
Pat pays to be with somebody that had their own, so I didn't have to go through the difficulties of raising my own children first. I got it easy.
How many does this make?
5? That's great.
I have 7.
But you had to work for it a lot harder than me.
That's true. And I have 2 greats.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I am old.
That's how you know you are. They remind you of that, right?
You're only as old as you feel.
That's
Right.
true.
In that case, I'm ancient.
That's where it doesn't help me.
Yeah.
Maureen,
Anyhow.
what have I forgotten?
You did this was a great meeting. In fact, if I can make one comment, I thought it was fabulous having Bob come in, and this is exactly why everybody should always have that first meeting and then that discussion, and then they come in with their final. That's exactly how the process should be.
Yep.
So like, he's like, oh, landscaping sounds terrific. Like, it couldn't have been, I mean, almost like,
Well, and it was funny because this project is the first one that I feel like was our first fun project.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, we didn't talk about the scoreboard as in the same way, you know, but like, this is the first one where it's like, yes, this is why we all want to be on CPA. We want to be able to help fund good projects that wouldn't get funded otherwise.
But I do.
He was a good applicant too, because he was asking, what is the next steps? And he had already gone to the select board. And so it's exactly that kind of thing where it's get in early, start the discussions, and then be prepared in January to clean it up and have a great presentation so that you don't, you know, fall apart when you're on town meeting floor.
But while it's
good.
Yeah, but while it's fun, you know, I think that the proposal for that potential lot, I think that's huge. I mean,
Sure.
you know, I mean, you know, I think that the issue of it's great that the property owners are willing to talk to us before they just go put it on the market, sell it, and, you know, it gets cleared. I mean, I think, you know, that's the kind, I mean, if you can demonstrate to people, I think it's a really good case, because if you can demonstrate to property owners that have that care about the town, care about their neighbors, that, you know, this committee can help you get the financial, you know, reward that you need to get out of your property, but you don't have to screw the town. I'm just gonna say that's not great language, but, you know, the town, you know, in order to do it.
Should we ask for a special town meeting?
For what? For that?
No, I mean, I think that if we get the boards and committees that are significant to act on it sooner rather than later, then there's an assurance to the landowner that James can pass on that'll be satisfactory.
But I think that's a good point. I mean, if those are the mechanisms, because I think that's my biggest thing is like, you know, we wouldn't necessarily have the capacity to act quickly if somebody was just going to sell it, you know, and I think, you know, but I do think that those of us that have been, you know, around long enough to remember the South Street deal and how things went south because things, you know, didn't get discussed, didn't get run by other boards, didn't, you know, weren't creatively.
Well,
you know,
well, part of the problem with holding everything to the annual is you honestly have like a very short period of time. And people,
well, sure, especially if you have a homeowner that wants to sell.
Yeah.
You know, we're very fortunate in this case that the homeowner is willing to wait until May.
But it will be pretty evident that, you know, whether we're going to play or not. But, you know, but do they need I mean, you know, what Jim's talking about, you know, assurances, like, do you sign some kind of agreement that says, you know, this is the price
you before you can do that, you have to go through, that's a question to ask Kristen, because it would have to go to town council.
I mean, it is a good conversation to have with her to, you know, I don't know if you've talked to her at all, Tim, but I do think that's a good conversation to have to say, hey, this is in our, you know, how would you see this playing? I mean, you know, maybe she just has more experience with that to just kind of, because I do think that this is just a first, but there might be another situation that there might be a house you'd want to try to save from a community. Like, how can we act fast or give property owners reassurance to, you know, give us the time to do it? I mean, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. And hopefully once the housing trust is set up, they'll be able to be a little bit more nimble about it.
Yes. Because people don't want to be left on the hook.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But again, it always comes down to funding in the end. And, you know, we all know what happens if you don't do your homework. Somebody asks some question about marketability or value.
As soon as James said anything to me, that was my first comment. I'm like, we have to do as much due diligence ahead of time as we can.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't want this to go sideways at town meeting. I think it's an important piece for the town. And
actually, I just wanted to ask one other question too, is because, you know, you mentioned, Tim, that you couldn't use CPA funds for this purchase if the house wasn't sold as an affordable unit. But I don't know if the town has the capacity, if, like you said, like the example of the Bullard house, well, they just chose to buy it. They raised the funds to buy the house. Could the town, if it wanted, raise the funds to buy the house, however, and then cut off the piece that, and use CPA to, divide it, have CPA buy the part that's for preservation versus be sold, and then sell the house however you want to sell it.
So that's an avenue you could pursue, but based on Carolyn's experience trying to get more than $50,000 to the purchase of the Horseshoe Pond piece,
right,
out of the town, the likelihood of the town saying we've got 400,000 to throw at this and then capture some CPA money for open space later is, and
I believe the Bullet House, the town only came up with what, 70,000?
No, it wasn't very much.
Well, given the condition, sure.
Well, yeah, but the Historical Society paid for half of it. So it's not like the town paid full price.
Right.
I know it's late. I don't want to go down that path.
Right. Having CPA
is rule. It's time to go to bed.
Having CPA is awesome because we have access to funds.
Right.
But because we have CPA, there doesn't,
you have to be careful.
And there also just doesn't seem to be an appetite to spend any money, any other money.
Right.
If it can be done with CPA funds.
Correct.
So.
Yeah.
No, I think it's good, but yeah, I think having that conversation with Kristen is good if we can.
So I'll talk to her tomorrow, and I'll try to pass on some thoughts to people.
Kudos to you for doing that legwork.
And Carolyn, a lot of us took great pleasure, although you may not have, in the acquisition of the Horseshoe Pond piece.
Well, I have a little PTSD about it, but
right, but those of us that were on the other side of the fence thoroughly enjoyed the process.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the result. I did not enjoy the process. I was really hoping to not have any conservation things on the warrant this town meeting. Like that was my goal. Well, but this piece is important enough, that
it's true.
It's not a huge ask, and I think it's
Janet Lamy at the Capital Planning meeting last Thursday, she also suggested maybe we'd want to put a water tower up at the top of the hill.
What?
So, but a water tower infers town water.
In 25 years, you might need it.
Oh,
we're never going to have town water. I don't see anybody wanting town water. I know I don't.
I understand that, but 25 or 50 years from now, they might reconsider.
Well, that's true.
My neck of the neighborhood, I'm not worried.
Yeah.
My water is a beautiful tea colored.
All right.
Good night.
Anything else?
Nope.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
And it's non-debatable. Carolyn.
Aye.
Eloise.
Aye.
Ellie.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
MJ.
Aye.
Kim is aye. Maureen says aye. She's